Before I begin in earnest, I'd like to address a common misconception about hope. You ever hear that age-old adage, if you wish in one hand, then spit in the other? Which do you have more of? I have, and I've got to say, I kind of agree with it. But I'm here to tell you this morning that wishing and hoping are not the same thing. There's a big difference between them. First, what is a wish? I mean, we all know a dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep, right? But what's a wish? Something you want. It's just, you kind of, it's a desire. The difference between wishing and hoping, how to explain it? I can wish that I would win the lottery, but unless I buy a ticket, I don't have any hope of doing that, right? Okay. Hoping is wishing that's done its homework, so to speak. But it's more than that, too. Homework isn't all there is to hope. There's a relationship, an intimate one, between hope and faith. Y'all remember faith? You were here last week? Youth? Any of you ever catch up on that? Faith? All right. And there are 4 different parts to faith as we discussed it, if you will recall. There is mental assent. It's agreement with a set of propositions. In this way, we can say that we have faith that, for example, the sun rose this morning at about 6:15. We mentally assent to that proposition. But faith is more than that. Faith is also fidelity. Faithfulness is in a relationship. Faith is trust. And faith is also shared vision. It's the ability to grasp hold of something greater than yourself that you're being called to, and to see that out there on the horizon. And what hope is in relationship to faith is hope is faith that's cast out into the future. Hope understands faith as a necessary prerequisite. It would be silly for us to hope in something that we did not already have faith in. And faith requires the actions of hope, doing our homework in order to make these things that we have received as a shared vision with our God come to pass. Hope also requires courage. And I'll tell you something, me personally, and this is a confession to you, congregation, I am not, in my essence, a hopeful creature. Hope is not something that comes naturally to me. And those of you who belong to my generation may find hope does not necessarily come naturally to you either. We were born a generation of cynics. For more than one reason, but really I think it all boils down to this. It's because disappointment, the disappointment that arises and comes from hope that does not come to fruition, is so great that we collectively shrink away from it. I know I do. Heck, I'll tell you what, you want to talk about doing your homework. I went through seminary, I did my bachelor's work in biblical studies and theology. I went out and got an additional degree. I worked with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in beautiful scenic Decatur, Georgia. And the time came to throw my hat in the ring to look around for a church that may feel, yeah, we know God's called you to pastor, but we feel God has called you to be our pastor. And I'd first heard from this wonderful congregation and its search committee. I had the opportunity to talk to you all on the telephone. And I came away from that thinking, wow, this seems like it would be a really neat place to be. And I told my beautiful wife about it. And we began talking about it as the days proceeded. We received more information from you folks, got an invitation extended to come down and talk to you all. And I'll tell you, this is just who I am. I was sitting back waiting for the other shoe to fall. I thought, this sounds too nice. It sounds too good. These people are too sweet. This is pandering. There is no way this is going to happen. And I said this to my wife, and she looked at me and said, "Quit being a coward." She called me out. My spouse is good for that, and I appreciate it. Absolutely right, yes. Quit being a coward. Have hope. Let yourself hope. Stand with God in hope. If you believe that this is what God has for you, then start living into that in expectation that this is what is going to come to pass. Have hope. And folks, hope is a very, very dangerous thing. I hoped at one point in my life, when I was a moody teenager, I hoped to one day be a beat poet. That's not a joke. And I'm going to subject you all to what that future might have been like here in just a moment. But first, how many of you heard in the news this week that Chuck Colson passed away? How many of you know who Chuck Colson is outside of Watergate? How many of you know Chuck Colson was involved in Watergate? All right, so we got a pretty good Chuck Colson base here. For those of you who don't, in the latter half of his life, Chuck Colson was a minister. He was a minister of the gospel whose views I don't necessarily always agree with, but then again, I don't always agree with my own views. Am I inconsistent? I am inconsistent then. Chuck Colson did, however, say one thing that really stood out to me about the nature of hope. Colson once asked, "Where is the hope?" I meet millions of people that tell me that they feel demoralized by the decay around us. Where is the hope? In response to that question, my 14-year-old self has the following to say. Hopelessness. I grew up in a generation that was steeped in hopelessness. Whatever was our catchword. Caring was uncool. We smelled like Teen Spirit, and we thought that God was cruel. We wore ragged clothes, grew out our hair, avoided smiling like the plague. Our speech was mumbled, sometimes slurred, but always intentionally vague. We knew hope led to disappointment and pride went before the fall. You see, Shakespeare was wrong. Shakespeare was wrong. Turns out it wasn't better to have loved and lost. It was better to have never loved at all. The way we saw it, what was left to hope for? Ours was the age of the anti-hero. Wars were unjust. Politicians were all liars, and the economy was a zero. We'd likely never be better off than our parents, and even they seem depressed, and who can blame them? I mean, look at our world. It truly is a mess. The world's polluted, the ice caps are melting, and the polar bears are dying. Why put forth effort if the world's falling down? Then what's the point in trying? Dying, death, for some, that seemed all that was inevitable. So they took their fears and channeled them through goth, punk, and death metal. Hopelessness. Now don't get me wrong. The music's not the problem. It's just a way to cope in a world that's forgotten not just what it means, but even how to hope. Hope is more than just a wish that all will turn out well. It's a living expectation with the power to propel. Let's see. Propel rhymes with propel. In a nutshell, the gospel, our fears to quell, makes gloom dispel, it doth foretell. Helps a future gel. Joyous Noel, enemy of hell, needs more cowbell. Perhaps we should break from our poem for a moment for a few examples of hope. Hope is a schnauzer chasing a semi-truck. Hope is the parents of a fifth-year senior spending $400 on a graduation gift instead of pre-registration for another round of summer school. Hope is a pair of newlyweds going out to buy a minivan. Hope is a 97-year-old with an online dating profile in search of a long-term relationship. Our world is a world that is in need of hope. Hope isn't blind trust. It isn't stupid. It's faith. Remember faith. We talked about that just a moment ago. It's faith cast out ahead of us. onto the future. Hope is the gas in our engines. Hope is a dynamic expectation of future good. Hope is the power needed for living. And hope is what God has built us to do. I hope for a brighter tomorrow. I hope for a bigger, better, brighter future for this congregation. We hope because we have a vision, and we know that we are not there yet, but because we have faith in the one who brought us here, we can have a sure and confident hope that He will bring us to what He has called us to. And as great as that is, as great as having worship and fellowship and service that provide a foretaste of the kingdom to come, and having all our friends come to join us. And may I add that these are my hopes for Central Christian Church, and I invite you to make them your hopes as well. As great as that is, as Christians, we have an even better hope. Our hope is eternal. Our hope is the hope of the universe. Our hope is in Jesus Christ and the work God did through Him for us. That ultimately death will be defeated, that life and love are the definitive answers to the questions of the universe. And this isn't just a wish. Jesus Christ did our homework for us through His birth, life and ministry, death, and resurrection. When we say that salvation is a gift from God, this is what it means. Jesus did the work for us so that we can share in this future hope. Our hope is that death, decay, loss, frustration, pain, suffering, and deprivation, that all of this is overcome through Christ, God's holy, perfect Son. Looks like I'm rhyming again. All right, let's see where we left off before. Oh, yeah. Foretell, yell, Noel, cowbell. I've got it. Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God in us to dwell. And before we leave this mortal shell and bid our world a fond farewell, we are compelled to tell and yell that Christ arose, death to expel. So have no fear, for all is well. And we started today with a part of a quote from Chuck Colson. So let's end with it as well, because I like symmetry. Where is the hope? I meet millions of people who tell me that they feel demoralized by the decay around us. Where is the hope? The hope that each of us has is not in who governs us, or in what laws are passed, or what great things we do as a nation. Our hope is in the power of God working through the hearts of people. That's where our hope is in this country, and that's where our hope lies in our lives. Amen.